Hello. Greetings and welcome to the Cloud English podcast. My name is Luke, and, well, we have a lot of things to talk about. Of course, we're going to be learning a lot of stuff. It's Friday, January 27th, 2092, and I think it's going to be a very interesting episode today. We're going to be talking about emotions. Now, I'm not going to be sharing any emotions, of course, because who cares about that? But I'm going to share with you different ways of talking about emotions and connecting with others on an emotional level in conversation. We're going to be going over some useful idioms and phrases. We're going to be talking about a lot of, I think, very useful stuff. We're going to look at a video and learn some vocabulary from a video as we've done in the past, right? So look forward to that. I will be answering a few questions, of course, as I often do. So great to have you here. And I've got a little bit of a new setup, so if you can notice anything different, let me know. But if not, well, that's probably good as well. Right off the top, just a few things. So one thing you can do to support the channel is wherever you're consuming this, subscribe, follow, like, all that kind of stuff. It's a small action you can take, which is actually a big way to support because it recommends it to the algorithms, and that's great. Also, check out my latest course. That course is on giving presentations. You can check that out in the links in the description, and you can also grab a free English course, Natural English Conversations. That's in the links in the description as well. And we have a Discord channel that's been going for a couple months now. I think it's going pretty well. I like to hang out there. It'll evolve over time. We're still figuring it out, but I think it's a pretty cool place. And those who are active, they're active. Those who are not. That's the way it is. You know, there's no pressure, right? But anyway, you can join that for free. That is, again, on Discord. If you don't know what Discord is or you don't understand it, well, there's no excuse. Learn it. It's not that hard. It's just a chat, basically. That's what it is. So check that out. You can join a free community there. And is there anything else? I found out last week, for those of you who have been watching the other conversations that I do with my wife, Mushroom, that we're going to be having a son. And that's pretty cool. That's pretty exciting. So we're thinking about names. We've still got quite a ways to go, quite a bit of time to go. But yeah, it's been a very interesting journey so far. Just nobody tells you. People tell you, that it's tough and it's challenging, but it's hard to understand something until you personally experience it, right? So you don't hear about things like nausea and the stuff that goes along with pregnancy, right? That much, I feel. I feel like people gloss over it, but it's a big thing for some people. And so this is going through these stages and steps. It's been a really interesting journey. I think Mushroom and I will be back doing our podcast tomorrow. So look out for that, okay? What else? I think that's pretty much it. If you want to listen to the audio version, you can do that if you're watching. And if you're listening to the audio version, you can watch. I recommend watching on YouTube. I mean, listen, if you watch on Facebook, that's fine. But why is my question. I know that some people do and some people like that. And I'm more power to you if you enjoy that. But I personally just don't get it. I don't understand why people spend time on Facebook. Again, personal preference, but what is the appeal? The viewing experience is not great. It just feels cluttered. I don't know. I've just never been a big fan of Facebook, ever. And I have one, and I use it to keep in touch sometimes with people. Please don't send me friend requests on Facebook. I don't approve any friend requests on Facebook. I don't want to add anyone. If you want to follow me somewhere, I guess you could follow me on Instagram or on... I mean, honestly, if you want to stay in touch with me, I think at this point, probably becoming a member on the website so that you get emails from me would be one, but also the Discord. I'm there, right? If you want to ask me questions, if you have things to say to me, Discord is where I am at the moment. Okay, so let's get into it. We have a lot of things to cover, and I want to start with something kind of broad, something fairly general in regards to how we connect with people emotionally, right? One common question, issue, concern that I get from English learners is not just, help me with my English, how can I improve? But how do I think of things to say in conversations? My English isn't good enough to make friends. First of all, nonsense. That's a nonsense, stupid excuse. So if you think that, you're wrong. And second, thinking of things to say becomes a lot easier when you shift your perspective about what a conversation is. So when you're getting to know someone, right? It's not a series of speeches where you have to think of something and then talk about it for a while and then take turns. It doesn't have to go like that, right? In fact, if you want to really connect with someone, if you want to develop a real authentic bond with someone, to show empathy, to connect on an emotional level, my recommendation, and this has worked for me throughout my life, I'll tell you about how I sort of came to this idea, because it is through a personal experience that I had. If you can figure out how to ask really good questions, your life will get a lot easier for a number of reasons, right? Questions are the answer to making friendships, in my view. Questions are the answer to getting sort of familiar with others, getting to know others. Questions are the answer to socializing, especially if you are the type of person who may have some social anxiety. Questions are the answer to not knowing what to say, because it alleviates all of the pressure from you to think of a soliloquy about your views on some topic, right? And there are many benefits to framing everything as a question. So I'm going to get into this, and I'm going to share a few specific ways that you can do this, that you can apply this, but I think it makes sense for me to share my experience first. I was traveling somewhere. It might have been China or India. I can't remember where I was. And I was in a cafe or something. And this person, a man in his mid-50s or something, started talking to me. And I discovered that he and his wife were riding their motorcycles around the country, and they were on a motorcycle trip, okay? This guy started with the assumption, here is this young guy, and he asks a polite question, which I think I did. He assumed then, from that point, that I was absolutely rapt, that I had nothing better to do than listen to how interesting his life was, how interesting his travels were. I couldn't care less. At the time, I was not confident enough to say, stop talking. I want to just sit here and have my coffee, right? I probably should have done that. So I was not interested. But that experience of this person talking at me for 45 minutes made me think, I can't be like that. I cannot become like that. Where people are just one-directional fire hoses and can't really look at another person and think maybe they have something to say to me now, to make it a real back and forth. So I made this kind of weird commitment at that point to myself. I said, okay, for the next year, whenever I find myself in a conversation, I am going to focus on only getting people to tell me things as a way to force myself to get used to this. And I'm going to just listen. And that's what I'm going to do. So I did that for the next year. And it was unbelievable. It was, sometimes I heard boring things and sometimes I heard interesting things. But just that shift of saying, I'm not going to say anything. I mean, I'll say a few things to fill space, but I'm going to emphasize listening and I'm going to emphasize asking. And doing that allowed me to make so many connections and friendships and learn so many things that it became a really powerful tool in my tool belt. Now I do say things, I do express my opinions, but I've always had that then tool that I can use to engage people. And I look around and I don't see a lot of people doing it. And so this is something that I think it's worth considering. When you want to make connections with people, show an interest. Ask a question because people like talking. People like to share things about themselves. People feel good when others show an interest in them, right? And then that has the benefit of taking pressure off you if you're the type of person who struggles to find things to say, right? So you find yourself in a situation. You are talking with someone and you think, oh, this is an interesting person. You can share your views, but just before you do that, ask one question, one open question as they're talking about something, or maybe before they say anything. Just ask a question and see what happens. I think you'll be surprised. Of course, it depends on the person, but I think you'll be surprised at how powerful this is. And if you develop this ability to ask really good questions, people start to think of you as a really interesting and insightful person, not realizing that it's not that you're saying a bunch of stuff that makes you seem interesting and insightful, but it's that you know how to push things along and get things started, right? We have a Discord community, which you're welcome to join. And one thing I noticed is that when a conversation starts with hello everyone or good morning, which is fine, it's a good wish, right? It doesn't really spark much. It doesn't really create engagement or interaction because people don't know what to do with it. People don't know how to engage with hello other than saying hi back, right? But if you ask an interesting question that is open-ended, that gets them thinking, that gets them to share a viewpoint, that gets them to explain something, then you can really get things going, right? So, people like to share things about themselves. People feel good when you show interest, and it takes the pressure off you, as I said. So what are some examples? I think we can talk about this in a few different sort of groups here. One would be to get someone started, you simply ask them what they think about something or ask them to explain something, right? Could you explain X? Could you tell me more about Y? What do you think about A? Why do you think B is the way it is? Pretty simple, right? Or you present them with a problem, and people will say something usually. If it's contextual, of course, it has to be in the context of the conversation, it has to make sense. Okay. But then as the conversation goes on, you might say things like, how did that make you feel? What would be an example of that? So someone says something, explains it, and you say, okay, well, interesting. What would be an example of that? Maybe you can think of an example, but you're pushing them to give you an example. Okay. Can you explain what you mean by that? So someone makes a statement, it's fairly broad, and you feel that could use a little bit more fleshing out, a little bit more detail. So you simply say, can you explain what you mean by that? Oh, sure, I can explain that. And then now they're talking again. Maybe they're telling you a story and you're showing them that you're listening. You might say, then what happened? Then what happened? So what's next, basically? Or they tell you something that's going on or something they did recently, and you say, instead of, oh yeah, and I blah, 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 where we take turns, you say, okay, and what was that like? Now they're not just telling you about the thing that happened. Now they're adding their emotions, their feelings. Okay? Why you could try saying, why do you think so? Anytime someone gives an opinion without explaining the reasoning behind the opinion, why do you think so? Why do you think that is? Why do you think that happened? Why is that? That's a simple way to say it. Now, you might avoid saying why. It depends on the situation. Oh yeah, why? Why is that? I like why is that personally, okay? Now, there are also these little ones that are sort of like comments that can sometimes push things along or also be used to show that you're just paying attention, right? So someone is telling a story or explaining something and you say, are you serious? To show, whoa, that thing that you just said, that's pretty amazing or impressive or interesting. Oh, really? 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 Now, the intonation of that one is very important. If you say, really? That's sort of like saying, yeah, wow, okay, cool. I'm interested in what you're saying. I'm listening. Keep going. But if you say, oh, really? It's sort of just like nodding, and it may even be telegraphing that you are not interested, right? Again, as I said, why can be useful, but it has to be in context, right? You want to be careful with that because you don't want it to seem like you're an inquisitor. Why? Then people might start to feel uncomfortable. And one that sounds softer than why is how come? Oh yeah, how come? So you explain something, you tell me an idea you have, you tell me a thing you did, and I want to know the reason. I say, oh, how come? Doesn't that sound better than why? Why? Right? So I like that one. Now, as a test, so here's my challenge to you, right? This is fairly general, but I'm just giving this as a general model for you to start having different interactions where you think of your conversations as a way for you to ask questions instead of a way for you to think of things that you have to say, give little speeches. It's not like that. It doesn't have to be like that. I accept the irony of me, but nobody else is here with me, right? It's just me and the stairs and my coffee. So I have to be the one talking, right? But I do love to ask questions. So try this out. Let me know how it goes. And if you want, you can try mirroring. This is a really interesting one, mirroring. This is where you take the last thing that they said. Sometimes you can use it as a trick almost and then see if people notice. I've often done it just as an experiment because I like to test how much people like to talk about themselves. So I'll just ask a question based on the last thing that they said. I've been looking for a new job ever since I got laid off. Oh, you're looking for a new job? Yeah, I've been looking that people don't notice that all you're doing is making a question out of the thing that they just said. And sometimes you can do it. You can do 5, 6, 7, and they don't notice. Yeah, I've been looking online. I tried. I interviewed with this company and that company, and so far I haven't had any luck. Nobody has given me any calls back. Oh, you haven't had any calls back? Yeah, nobody's given me any. It's really interesting. It's like a little hack of human psychology. It doesn't work for everybody, but it's fun. And maybe that is my that might be my devious side coming out a little bit, because I like to experiment socially when I have conversations. When I have a conversation, in general, I look at it as a little experiment that I'm doing to learn something. So just know that my intentions aren't always, I really want to know. Sometimes I'm trying stuff out and having fun with it. So give it a try. Let me know how it works for you. If you haven't already done so, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. And also get a free English course in the links in the description. All right. So let me know how that goes if you try it out. Some people don't have an issue with this. I think some people are just naturally socially gregarious. I'm not naturally socially gregarious. I'm a natural introvert. So introverts and extroverts, it's defined in different ways. I think an introvert is defined as someone who isn't necessarily antisocial, but doesn't glean social interaction, doesn't give them energy, right? They don't glean energy from social interactions. When they have a social interaction, instead they feel drained by it. So then they need to recharge by themselves. And I think that's definitely the case for me. So that doesn't mean I don't like social interactions. It just means that I need to recharge after I have them. And then an extrovert would be the opposite of, they start to get antsy when they're by themselves too long, and they glean energy from social interactions. So if they want to relax and they want to feel better, they need to be around friends. They need to hang out. They need to have fun, which is incomprehensible to me. So it's not about how you actually act in social situations. It's not that an introvert is very... They can be very outgoing in situations. It's about how they feel inside throughout social interactions. One of the big proponents of one of the guys who really developed this is Carl Jung, who talks a lot about the sort of the mixing of the two and how they fit in with his theory of the unconscious. So that's pretty interesting, I think. Welcome to those who joined. We have Stephanie and Niza and Mbarak and Sway and Kyria is here. Hello. Welcome. Hello and welcome. Okay. So what else have we got? Yeah, I'm going to be talking in a moment about some differences between words that are we regard as similar and grouping them into four, particularly when we're talking about things that are good. So we'll get to that in a second. I have just got a notification that there's someone at my door. Someone's at my door. It's okay though. It's probably just a delivery. So I live now in the countryside, and as a result of living in the countryside, you have to make some adjustments, right? One thing you have to adjust to is delivery times. Now, it's not bad, but definitely living in New York City, living outside of the city, things arrive usually one day later than they would living in the city. So it's not bad, right? But also in an apartment building, your packages would just be downstairs and you would get them. I have trucks driving up to my house when packages are delivered, and then they will usually throw them in front of the front door. So it's not less convenient. It's just different. A lot of trucks pulling into the driveway. And there are other things to adjust to. For example, water is a big issue. That's something it's weird. You have to be responsible for the quality of your water. So that's means I have to go to the water department to get it tested, and they have to test it to make sure it's not poisonous. And then you have to get filtration, and that's a big thing. You don't think about this stuff in the city. You just think, oh, water is just there. So all kinds of stuff like that. Okay, well, I hope you all are doing well. To those who have joined and are watching live, if you have any questions, I can do my best to get to any that are interesting. If they're boring questions, I will ignore them. But if they're interesting questions, I will do my best to answer them. As I said, coming up, we're going to be talking about some idioms, and we're going to be learning from a video, as we've done previously, related to the global recession. But it was a video that's made before the recession, so I want to sort of draw some parallels. Well, not parallels. See if we can see how well they predicted it, but also be pulling language out of the video, of course, right? Right? Right. Right? Right. That's right. Okay. All right. Hello to Vitali, who's now here. Any books? Nasi, I can answer that question, but I would like you to possibly give me a little bit more information, because people have different preferences in regards to reading. So let me know what general genre of books you like to read, fiction, nonfiction. Let me know generally what your reading level is, and then I might be able to give you some more personalized recommendations. And you can also let me know what your goals are. That's key as well, okay? Okay. So let's get into our thing. Where's my notes? Okay, I need my notes. My notes, very important to have my notes. We have words like very good, awesome, amazing, incredible, phenomenal, terrific, wonderful, excellent, superb, splendid. For words that mean very good, what are the differences between them? Are the differences in the definitions, or are the differences in the connotations? Well, that is an interesting question. We have to understand, I guess, what those two things mean before we really dive into this. The definition is what you read in the dictionary. The connotation is how it's usually used, and when people use it, what does it feel like, right? What is people's sense, that thing that's hard to express when they hear that? That is the connotation. So we're going to talk about the connotations of good. Good, the word good. Now, I would say that the word good itself is so general that it almost doesn't have a connotation. But it would depend on the situation and maybe the tone of voice you use. If someone says, "Oh, I'd like to do this later. What do you think about that?" And you say, "Good, good." Then I think that what you said is good. I like your plan. But if you say, "Good," then, okay, you're in a hurry and you're just saying something and you might not really mean it, right? So when we talk about connotations, we're talking about much more than simply the meaning of the word. Okay? So that is how I want to sort of frame this question. Not about definitions. We're talking about the feeling, right? The feeling. Okay. So let's start with ones that are pretty general. When I say general, what I mean is when you say these, it's going to show maybe excitement. It's going to show a sense of it being more than just good, but very good, right? If you look up the definition of these, you're going to get something pretty pretty similar for all of them, right? And so we can say that generally speaking, they're synonyms, but each of them might have a slightly different use in different cases and might be used by different people. So awesome, amazing, incredible, phenomenal, terrific, wonderful, excellent. These could be used to react to something. If somebody shows you a painting they made, right? Your son or daughter shows you a painting and you say, that's awesome. You could equally say, that's amazing, that's incredible, that's phenomenal, that's terrific, that's wonderful, that's excellent. And I think you would have the same general connotation for all of those. And this is a little bit subjective, but I would say that awesome feels more exaggerated, louder. Amazing feels more exaggerated, louder, right? Incredible really does give a sense of you're in disbelief about how great this is, right? Of course, it depends on how you say it. And phenomenal, I would say, is similar. Whereas terrific, excellent, wonderful could be used to mean very good, but maybe have a less, let's say, less oomph when we use them. Wonderful could be used in different ways, depending on the type of person, and the tone of voice, I think, would be slightly different. So I don't want to make any clear distinctions among these. I think they're all very, very similar as general ways to express this. But they might be used differently by different people, because I cannot imagine someone over the age of, 70 or something saying, that's so awesome. I just can't picture it. Generationally, it's weird, right? Maybe the same for amazing. But I can picture excellent, wonderful. I can picture someone over the age of 70 saying, oh, that's wonderful, that's terrific, right? But awesome feels to me like something that someone my age might say. That's awesome. Oh, that's awesome. Right? So there is a bit of nuance there in who's using it, but I think not too much nuance in the general feeling we get when we use these. Okay? So just be aware of that, right? That if you want ones that are the most general, you might go with incredible, terrific, wonderful, and excellent. And if you want something that feels a little younger, maybe awesome, amazing, right? I don't know about phenomenal. Phenomenal sounds like you're trying to use a word that's different than amazing, right? You're using amazing too much, and for the sake of variation, you want to use the word phenomenal instead. I don't know about that one. Okay. But what about ones that feel formal? Ones that feel kind of, in my view, a little stuffy. Superb, splendid, marvelous, remarkable, outstanding, sensational. Now, I say it like that because that's the feeling I get when I see these words. They feel formal. They feel like things that you would say at an opera. They feel like things that you would say after you read a poem that's been carefully written and presented to an audience. Oh, that was superb. Now, that's not to say I never use it. I'm not a very formal person, but I sometimes use it when I want to have that slightly formal emphasis. The remarkable thing about words is that each one has a slightly different connotation based on its usage. So their remarkable is useful. I don't want to say the amazing thing about, because I feel like I want to make my case maybe more academic. I want to make it a little bit more, not stuffy and formal necessarily, but I want to make sure you know that I'm serious about what I'm saying, and I'm not trying to exaggerate necessarily. I really mean it is remarkable. Now, each of these might be used slightly differently. I think saying the marvelous thing about connotation, I could say that, it just doesn't feel right coming out of my mouth in that specific case. Remarkable is something that stands apart from others. Marvelous is sort of like, oh, that's really great, but a slightly more formal way to say it, right? I rarely say the word superb, speaking personally. We're not saying you can't, just me. I rarely say the word superb unless I want to sort of make a joke about me saying the word superb, right? I rarely say the word sensational. I do often say outstanding. I sometimes say remarkable in examples like the one I just gave, right? And splendid would be a good reaction to things. People present me with a plan. Hey, we want to go here tonight for dinner. I say, splendid. That just means, that sounds good to me. I like your plan. That's fine. And I want to say something other than good, very good, amazing, great, sounds good, right? It's just variety. So don't think of this as things you can or can't say or shouldn't say. They're all available to you. They're all common. It's just a matter of choosing frequency, whether it feels right for you. We all have our own kind of different way of thinking about it, right? So it's up to you. And to get a sense for these, you have to just look out for them in examples. Well, the way this is used, that's kind of how I talk. That feels right for me or wrong for me, right? I'm just trying to class these in fairly broad groups. Okay. So what about the slang? What about dope and rad and wicked and sick and fab and lit? Okay, well, these all, again, mean something very similar. Something is awesome. Now, I almost put awesome in this category, but I feel like awesome, and notice I'm using that phrasing, I feel like, because this is very subjective. I'm trying to give you my sense for this. I'm trying to give you a lens, a native speaker lens, just one person's lens into this, into the connotation of these, because it is deeply subjective. So awesome, I feel like, has become so normalized among so many people that you would have no problem using it in a meeting, in almost any situation. It's so common, right? But if you were in a serious meeting and you said, wicked, I suppose it depends on the group of people and if you're being sarcastic or not, but it could sometimes be inappropriate, right? Well, that's dope. I say dope ironically sometimes because I think it's kind of fun to say. But we get a sense for these of, I don't know, bro words, especially dope, wicked, and sick. So dope, wicked, and sick are kind of like surfer dude bro words. Whoa, that's sick. Oh, that's dope, man. Definitely younger, the younger demographic using those more often. And it having a slang usage, not being something that you would say if you want people to regard you as speaking sincerely, and especially not formally, right? This is something you say with your friends in a very casual setting. And I use all of them. I use dope, I use rad, I use wicked sometimes. Using language is about play. It's about using different things. It's about expressing yourself. So I never say I never, ever, 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 ever use anything. At least I try not to. Everything is available to me, right? Okay. Now, rad, maybe. But rad, which comes from radical, feels to me more like a Gen X thing, or people who grew up in the 70s, or maybe grew up in the 60s, I suppose. I suppose you could put some baby boomers in there too. So I think it's been around longer as that sort of casual slang-ish way to say very good. So that's rad, that's radical. Radical people don't say, but rad, you still hear people say it, and I sometimes use it. Sick, I don't know when that started, but a lot of people in my generation, I'm a millennial, a lot of people in my generation use it. That's sick, which means that's really cool, that's great, I really like it, it's awesome, right? That's sick. Now, lit, I would say, is not in my generation. Lit would be, I think, what we could call Zoomers or Gen Z. So they have lit as maybe my generation has sick and dope. My generation uses sick and dope. I think everyone uses cool, right? Cool I didn't even bother putting in here because I think everybody says cool, except for maybe very old people. I think most people say cool. I say cool a lot. I say it so much that I didn't even put it here. But yeah, sick and dope feel to me like they belong to millennials. Wicked and rad feel to me like they belong to, and again, I'm just kind of ballparking this, they belong to Gen X, which is one above me. Lit feels like it belongs to Gen Z, which is below me. And then fab feels like it belongs to baby boomers, which is even older, right? Fab is short for fabulous, but I think it came about, I don't know exactly when, but it feels like a 60s, 70 things. That's fab. I don't hear people really say that anymore, except people who are now in their 60s and 70s. So that's just my sense for it. So anyway, these three groups, right, of let's call it ones that are general, that many people use, don't have that clear sense of being formal or casual. The formal group, it gives this sense of wanting to be taken seriously, right? And maybe can sound a bit stuffy. And then the very casual group, used by different maybe groups of people generationally, but generally speaking, not used in formal settings among friends, very casually. We call that slang, okay? So then what about cool and great? They're so ubiquitous, they're so common that I don't even think we need to talk about it. They're everywhere. Everyone uses great. Everyone uses great, at least. Cool, maybe almost everyone. Very, very common. I can almost picture my grandmother who's in her 80s saying cool. She might not, but that might be the upper limit. I can picture it though. I cannot picture her saying awesome. I cannot picture her saying, oh, that's rad. No way. So this is a difficult subject. This is really tough as a teacher because I'm not telling you what things mean. And I almost think giving you specific examples would cause it to get pigeonholed and then would actually maybe negatively affect your impression of that. I'm trying to give you this sort of broad view of how these are kind of used and their connotations so that you can start to think about it. At least you have the groups now. You can start to think about your own usage and start making real decisions about how you want to express yourself, knowing that these are not all, even though they're synonyms, not all used in exactly the same way, okay? So, start thinking about it. If you have any questions, let me know. I'd be happy to answer. If you haven't already done so, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe also. Check out my full courses in the links in the description, and you can get a free English course, Natural English Conversations, in the links in the description. All right. Yeah, literally, I often hear the word lit and cool. Yeah, lit is becoming more common. It's one of those words that's arising out of, let's say, specific generational usage into other generations. I've heard people more and more start to say lit among millennials. I am still not at a place where I'm comfortable using it. It just feels weird coming out of my mouth, right? And I think we don't think about that often enough. We have a unique fingerprint for the type of language we choose to use. You do, I do, everyone does. You have to know that. Just because you know certain words doesn't mean that you should use those. Just as I choose not to wear red shirts, right? I wore a red shirt one time when I was maybe 12. And I looked at myself in the mirror and I said, absolutely not. Red shirts and me? No, never. And since then, I have never worn a red shirt. Now, why am I saying that? That's a decision that I made. I made a decision that me and red shirts don't go together. Red shirts don't work for me because it just doesn't feel right. And that's not something that I can explain rationally necessarily. I just see myself in a red shirt and I say, no, that's not me, right? And you make billions of decisions, well, billions. You make decisions like that every day. And that gradually sort of builds up your self-perception of who you feel you are, what fits you, what suits you, the kind of car you drive, the kind of clothes you wear, the choices you make, the music you listen to, the people you associate with, the books you read. All of these choices and decisions, if they're made authentically, sort of create this Venn diagram where you're at the center and you're the only one who is quite, and I'm not saying that all of these things that you do are you. I'm just saying that you're at the center of this unique Venn diagram of decisions. And if you authentically make those decisions, then hopefully you feel comfortable with yourself, right? I feel perfectly happy not wearing red. And I don't want to push myself to do that because it just doesn't feel, it's not me. Okay. Now, sometimes you need to push through those things because they're limitations, and that's great. I'm not so sure that wearing red shirts is one of those. But it all comes back to the point of when you decide what to say and not say, it's got to feel right. So don't force yourself to say things are lit if it doesn't feel right. Don't force yourself to say anything specifically. That doesn't mean you shouldn't learn everything. You should learn everything. Learn as much as you can, but use what feels right to you. And in order to understand what feels right to you as an English learner, you also need to sort of develop a sense of the way that things feel, the connotation of words and phrases and things like that. So you need to then look at examples. You need to watch videos. You need to watch movies. You need to listen to podcasts. You need to do all those things which can give you that sense, and you can build up your sort of unique fingerprint of language usage. And I would encourage you to do that. It's not something where anybody should tell you what you should and shouldn't say, right? All right. See you, Purple. See you, Purple. Okay, so I like to say amazing and wonderful, says Hugh Purple, and I would tend to agree with that. I say amazing and wonderful pretty often. Easy peasy. What do you think about fake English teachers on YouTube? I think it's great. Fake or real, if they're providing value, who cares? Let's see. I would like to read some book that improves my self-development. Okay, well, that's a pretty big category, Nasi, but you might start with something like, it's a book that I really like called The Power of Habit. You might check that out, The Power of Habit. That book covers, habits and how to build good ones and get rid of bad ones. And it provides lots of interesting examples. So that's a good one to read. Maybe start there. The Power of Habit. It's an easy read. Lots of engaging examples. I like it quite a bit. All right. I'm going to take a quick coffee break. So why don't we, in the meantime, watch a short video on flourishing. I have been reading a lot of Plato recently, and previously I read the Nicomachean Ethics by Aristotle, and he has this concept of eudaimonia. And so why don't we just quickly watch a short video, 2-minute video, while I take a quick coffee break. Amin, hello, I want to listen, but your videos aren't on Apple Podcast app. No, the videos are not on Apple Podcasts, but that's not my fault. I mean, that is Apple's fault. So, what happens is basically I post the this podcast. Some of you are listening right now. Hello, listeners. Hello, dear listeners. So, there's video And so the live part happens on YouTube and Facebook. If you want to watch live, that's where we are. Okay, so if you want to comment live or ask questions or whatever. Then it's then available for later. If you want to watch it later on YouTube and Facebook, you can do that. And Twitch. Then you can listen to it if you want on basically all podcast platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, Stitcher, a bunch, right? But Apple doesn't have the feature, or doesn't allow me to post the video version. So on Apple Podcasts, it is audio only. Now, a lot of people are cool with that, and I think that's fine. If you want to watch the podcast as a podcast in a podcasting platform, the only way to do it, if you're not on YouTube or Facebook, is in Spotify. So if you go to the Spotify version, if you go to Spotify and you search Cloud English, you will come up with the podcast, and you can watch the video if you choose or not. But if you're an Apple Podcast, you have no choice. You have to listen to it on audio. That's just the way it is. I don't know why. I don't make the rules. That's just the way it is. Nothing I can do about it. Sorry, everybody. Apple's behind the times. But if you are listening on Apple, don't forget to give it a 5-star review. Make sure you follow. Make sure you subscribed. Check us out on YouTube. That'd be great. Appreciate it. Appreciate your support. If you want to follow, you can also subscribe on YouTube and follow on Facebook. You can check out the Discord. The Discord is in the links in the description. And if you want, you can get a free course, which is also in the links in the description. So check it out, and I'll see you there. See you in the courses. If you want to get full courses, you can do that. Easy, it's easy peasy. I got to work on it. I have a lot of work to do on my accents. Oh well. Coffee break time. Coffee break. You know what? Oh, man, have you seen this animation? Oh, this is a great animation. If you have not seen this animation by Steve Cutts called Happiness, it's got 38 million views. It's in recommended here. It is unbelievable. It is so good. It's such great commentary on just life and the chaos of living. It's really good. I'm not going to show it because I think it might not be able to watch it, but it's really good. I love it. I love it.
How to live a good life? That's the basic philosophical question. Aristotle's answer was live virtuously. Do what a virtuous person would do, and that will make you happy.
Virtuously means you have your own little code inside of your head, and you follow it. You follow the code, what is right. There is a right and a wrong, and you do what's right.
Well, not exactly happy, but eudaimon. Eudaimon.
Eudaimon? I thought it's eudaimon. I've always said it as eudaimonia. Eudaimon. Okay, well, Stephen Fry clearly is more qualified to answer that than me. Stephen Fry, very famous British TV personality, writer. He has a series of books, and maybe this is to Nisa, you asked a question. He's got a series of books called Mythos. One is called Heroes, and one is called Troy. And they're very well written. And what I would strongly recommend, because Stephen Fry's voice is, as you can hear, it's golden. He has an amazing voice. I love when he speaks. I love to listen to Stephen Fry's voice. He reads all 3 books. So my recommendation would be to get on Audible his 3 books. Start with Mythos. It's basically the story of Greek mythology. He goes through the whole pantheon. He talks about Kronos and Rhea. He gets into the stories of the heroes and the various gods, and it's great. It's really good. Strongly recommend Mythos by Stephen Fry. He also reads the entire Sherlock Holmes series, so getting Sherlock Holmes, pretty good too. He does a great job with that.
Eudaimonia, sometimes translated as flourishing, is what we all want. It's the one thing people seek for its own sake. Eudaimonia isn't a matter of 1 or 2 moments of bliss. As Aristotle put it, one swallow doesn't make a summer. It's the result of a successful life lived well, together with a bit of good luck. In his Nicomachean Ethics, basically an early self-help...
That's another one I'm mispronouncing. I've always said Nicomachean Ethics, and he's saying here Nicomachean Ethics. Slightly different. Okay. Oops.
Book, he explained how to flourish by cultivating the virtues. Every virtue is a disposition to behave in certain ways that lies between 2 extremes. Courage, feeling the fear but doing it anyway, lies between cowardice, when you feel the fear and can't do it.
This is the idea called the golden mean. Generally, I don't like it. I think there are times when the extreme is the absolute best thing to do. And so if you're always in the mean, the average, finding the perfect balance, I feel like something is missing. I don't know. Now, in terms of virtues, I can understand generally following a balanced path, but there are definitely times when chaos and outrageous behavior can be called for, I think.
And recklessness when you don't feel the fear.
Yeah, I mean, how much great music would not have been made without recklessness, right? Think about your favorite music. There is an aspect of recklessness in really good music, right? I think.
When you should. Generosity lies between stinginess, when you're mean, and profligacy, when you throw your money around, and so on. This is Aristotle's doctrine of the golden mean. Whether you can act virtuously or not in part depends on how you've been brought up, your moral education, as well as on the choices you make. If that goes well, you'll act appropriately and feel the appropriate emotions, whatever situation.
And I read the Nicomachean Ethics, and he also brings in the concept of habit, and that it's not just... education part includes the development of habits to sort of habituate yourself to the mean. So to the virtuous behavior, to the virtuous way of being, you habituate to that by building habits. And that's, I guess, part of the upbringing as well.
You find yourself in.
Right. Just watch a second of this one. The rat race, and it gets into, yeah, it's it's great. Please watch it. Please watch it. Happiness by Stephen Cutts, Cutts. I think many of you will find some very common characteristics in modern life there, presented in an interesting and somewhat critical way. Okie dokie. Back to business. Back to business. Right. Where were we? We went through the connotations of good. I want to talk a little bit about worry and stress. Okay? Some idioms for worry and stress. So we're going to hop over to the Blackboard to do that. Give me 1 second. Make sure my board is working correctly. Hey, come on now. There we go. Okay. Let's talk about idioms for scary things, stress, when you're not sure what's going to happen in the future, worry. We're going to talk about sink in, hit home, on edge, overwhelm, stretch thin, a breaking point, and under a great deal of stress. Okay? These are really common. So when you feel worried about something, which is common, especially when we move through, for example, a global recession, economic recession, we need to at least know how to talk about the way that we feel, right? It might not change the reality, but it might allow us to at least communicate with others about how we feel, okay? So let's pop over to the Blackboard, and I'll move myself slightly, and let's get into it. And as I said, we're going to go through these one by one. I'm going to give you some examples, sort of talk through it. We're going to start with sink in. Now, this is when a reality changes or some new information arrives, usually negative information, but not necessarily, and then there's time to adjust to it, or you need time to adjust to it to sort of realize it on a, let's say, an experiential level, right? It started to sink in that I have to work extra hours this week. So there's a difference between getting the information and that information sinking in. And I think the difference is, it's important to understand that the difference is in this feeling inside and not about understanding actually, right? Because if you say, I understand that you're telling me I need to work over the weekend, right? It may not have sunk in emotionally for me. So it's not about just getting it. It's about feeling the getting, if that makes sense, right? It started to sink in that I have to work extra hours this week or this weekend is when you start to actually do it, then you begin to understand deeply that it's going to affect you negatively, that it's going to hurt you, that it's going to cause you to cancel your plan that you had on Saturday afternoon. And so it's when it starts getting real in your life that it sinks in. Or it happens over a period of time. Famously recently, when Elon Musk purchased Twitter and walked in the front door with a sink, he made a sort of visual pun, let that sink in, letting it sink in that this big thing has happened and things are going to change. So basically signaling that this is the beginning of a process, right? Now, usually it's for bad news, but sometimes it's for mind-blowing facts, right? I recently learned that 30% of Americans sleep with a stuffed animal at night. Let that sink in. So you understand the words I said, but now start processing that. What does that mean? Why do so many adults need to sleep with stuffed animals? What? Yeah. Right? So let it sink in. So let it sink in is a very common way to express this or use this, okay? Let it sink in. Or it started to sink in. It's starting to sink in. Now it is sinking in. Okay. What about hit home? Now, hit home is similar in some ways, but different in others. Her words hit home, and I realized I needed to make changes in my life. So this is often when you hear about someone else's experience, something else that happened, but it causes, by chain reaction, something to happen for you. It has an emotional impact for you. My friend recently lost her job, and that really hit home with me. So that realization that maybe I'm taking my employment for granted, and I need to make sure that I'm financially secure and stable, because I realize, I guess anyone could lose their job at any time, right? That really hit home. So it sort of has an impact on you. It resonates with you. The thing that happens doesn't usually happen to you. It's usually you hearing about that, right? Now, sometimes this is used for empathy, when you have a previous experience that matches this thing that you hear, right? So, and it could spur you to action or not necessarily, right? So when you, let's say you experience some traumatic thing in your childhood, right? Then you watch a video, from example, from Soft White Underbelly. It's this channel that shows all of these people's terrible childhoods, right? Often they're talking about their childhoods and trauma that happened, being abandoned by their parents. And so that really hit home. That interview really hit home because maybe it matches your own terrible thing that happened to you. Or maybe you know someone, and that now allows you to empathize with that person more because you see them. So it's sort of like it strikes a chord in you that makes you feel a deep feeling of connection that may cause you to have more empathy, that may cause you to do something, that may cause you to feel more grateful, that may cause you to feel a different way than you did before. And that's why it hits home. It's a little bit different than hits too close to home, and maybe that's one to talk about another time. It is slightly different, okay? Let's talk about on edge. Now, if we have something like a global financial recession, right? Then people tend to not feel as relaxed as when everything is fine. There's plenty of money. Everyone has lots of money. No issues, right? But if people feel, let's say, financially threatened, right? Or they feel like things are getting so expensive, or they feel the inflation is so bad, or it's hard to get what I need. Maybe there's a shortage of something. Whatever it is, anytime there's a threat of danger, or there is danger, or circumstances are, let's say, precarious, then you feel a bit nervous. You feel a bit worried, right? And it could be for any number of reasons. Maybe you're anticipating a result of a medical test you did last week, and you know you're going to get the results today. So how do you feel about that? Well, if it could be good or not so good, then you might feel on edge. On edge is sort of like not relaxed, a little bit tense, and kind of waiting for the possibility of something negative to happen, and it's affecting you emotionally. I've been on edge since the deadline was announced. So the deadline was announced. We didn't know when we had to finish X, whatever project. Now we find out that it's in 2 weeks, and I feel that it's going to be very tough to make that deadline, and if we don't, then there will be some bad consequences. So I feel on edge now because there is some uncertainty and a possibility of something bad in the future. So that makes me feel nervous. I feel on edge. I don't know why my am is so close. I am on edge. I've been on edge. I don't know why I'm so on edge, right? Now you may be thinking, okay, well, what about the sense of drinking 9 cups of coffee? There's nothing going on in my life, but I feel on edge because I had 9 cups of coffee. I think some people might say that, just an overall sense of nervousness caused by the ingestion of specific chemicals. Maybe you could say that. It's usually going to be used for circumstances, situations, events, deadlines, outcomes, results, changes to your life, possibilities that could be bad or scary, and less often used for, dang, I drank too much coffee. But again, it's not wrong. I think it's not wrong to say that. It's just, I think, less common. Okay, what about overwhelmed? Overwhelmed. If you are overwhelmed, then you're overburdened, usually emotionally, okay? Now, it is possible to use this to simply mean overburdened and emotionally you're fine, but generally, if you're not specific about that, people will assume it's emotional. And if it's an emotional thing, it doesn't have to be connected to any specific thing. Maybe you're just a person with a lot of anxiety. So I've been feeling very overwhelmed recently, and I think it's just because I'm worried so much about what could happen. Nothing's going on. Nothing's happening. Maybe. Now, it could be that a lot of things are happening. You're extremely busy, and as a result of being very busy, you feel very stressed, right? I'm overwhelmed with the amount of work I have to finish by tonight. So this has 2 meanings. One meaning of overwhelmed with the amount of work I have to finish by tonight means that it's more than I can do, probably. It's too much of a burden. So that's the sort of literal meaning of this is a burden and it seems like it's too much for me. But then the other meaning of that, the other side of that, is then how that makes me feel, which is stressed, which is tense, which is worried about what happens if I don't get everything done by tonight, which is when I need to, which is when the deadline is, right? So just know that when you use overwhelmed in this kind of context, we're talking about kind of a coin with 2 sides. In most cases, the thing that causes it, the work that I have to do by tonight, and the feeling that I have, the emotional state of stress, anxiety, nervousness. But just know that it's possible to use overwhelmed when there's no cause, and it's possible to use overwhelmed when we're just talking about the circumstances and we don't feel that way at all. Okay? So it's pretty flexible. We can even use overwhelmed for very good things, right? If you, I talked about somebody maybe losing their job. If somebody loses their job, and then their friends reach out to show support, and they're very helpful, and they just tons of support from all your friends, then you might be overwhelmed in a positive way. I was overwhelmed by all of the support that I got from my friends when I shared this news. So the news may be bad, but you're overwhelmed by support. And maybe this is a celebrity talking about how much love their fans send them, right? Fan mail. I'm just so overwhelmed by how much support I get from my fans. No matter what happens, they always support me, and it's overwhelming. So that is used in a positive sense. You're overwhelmed with gratitude, positive emotions, a feeling of being supported and loved, So you can be overwhelmed that way too. It's just, I'm so overwhelmed, right? This is the emotional focus, by the way. This is not what's going on. This is the emotional focus. It's overwhelming. So wonderful, right? That would be something that some people would say. I don't think I've ever said that in that way in my life because, I don't know, it's not my personality type to be overwhelmed by things in that way. But hey, it happens. So we have a few more I want to talk about. 3 more specifically. We're flying right through these, okay? What about stretched thin? Stretched thin. This could have an emotional focus, but generally it's about a description of the situation you're in terms of resources and in terms of, let's say, effort. I've been stretched thin lately with work and family responsibilities. So that's your energy and your time causing you to be in a situation where maybe there's no time to relax. You have to put all of your time into work and family responsibilities. Now, feeling then stretched thin is as a result of that, maybe I feel overworked, I feel overburdened, and I'm not happy and relaxed. So I would say I feel stretched thin, but it's because of that. So this is different from overwhelmed. We said overwhelmed could be isolated. I can feel overwhelmed by nothing just because I'm living in my own head and I'm an anxious person. Generally, people will not say, I'm just feeling stretched thin. We correlate feeling stretched thin with the things that make us feel that way. The family responsibilities, the work responsibilities. I've been stretched really thin. I feel stretched thin. I have to take a vacation. I need a vacation, right? Now, sometimes this is specifically resource related. Let's say financial. We're stretched pretty thin right now. We're on a very tight budget. So it's something like a very tight budget. If you're on a very tight budget, that means you don't have extra money to spend. You can't go out to eat. You have to really be careful with your money. Why? Because you're stretched thin, meaning financially, there's just not a lot of extra. It's as though your money has to be thinly stretched over the things that you have to buy, over your expenses, in order for you to survive, I guess we could say, or, pay your bills, right? But it could also be general resources. Maybe a company, running a company, and there are 5 people, but the workload keeps increasing. And so these 5 people are doing more and more and more and more. We need to hire 5 more people, so we probably will. And when we explain that, we might say, with everything we have to do, we're really stretched thin with the team we have. So we're going to be hiring more people. We're really stretched thin, meaning the resources of the team are at a breaking point and are being pushed. And it's difficult to handle everything, right? So we can imagine in the same way, stretched very thin. Now, I mentioned breaking point. So that's actually the next one that I want to talk about. A breaking point means that things cannot go further before there's a collapse, there's a disaster. It could be in the sense of the company that I just talked about. We're reaching a breaking point where we fail to deliver things to our customers. We're at a breaking point where if we get any more demand with the number of people we have here in the office, we're just going to not be able to get everything done, and that's going to cause problems. We need to hire 5 more people. We need to expand our team right now. Now, that actually sounds like a pretty good problem to have, right? There's so much stuff to do that, okay, it makes more sense to bring on more people. But we can also be at an emotional breaking point. I'm reaching my breaking point. I can't handle this stress anymore. Now, again, there's probably a cause, but the focus is on your feeling of essentially feeling like you're about to lose your mind. Feeling like you can't handle whatever it is that's causing this. You can't handle it anymore, right? Something has to change. Now, it doesn't talk about or focus on the change itself, but it might be how you would set that up. So you would say something like, I'm reaching my breaking point. I can't handle this stress anymore. I'm taking a 3-week leave. I have to. I'm going to travel. I'm going to just unwind and relax. So that's stress, but you could have a breaking point in terms of worry. Maybe there's just a lot of uncertainty going on in your life. I feel like I'm at a breaking point, right? Anxiety, worry, stress, that sort of thing. So there can be breaking points for capacity, breaking points for emotions. It just means it's right up at that point where something is about to snap, break, and then bad things will happen, right? So it's usually used right before you would hopefully propose or mention or bring up a solution or an idea or how you're going to handle it, right? Now, finally, I just want to say, because we're on the topic, this is not even, I don't even know if we can call this an expression. It's just a common way to describe stress. I'm under a great deal of stress and sometimes pressure. I'm under a great deal of stress. And you could say a lot of stress or pressure, and that's fine too. I think a great deal of stress is probably the most common one. She's under a great deal of stress since she's taking care of her ill mother and working full time, right? So it's a feeling of having things on top of you. Under a great deal of stress means that you have a lot of burdens, you have a lot of responsibilities, you have a lot of people asking you to do things, you have a lot of demands on your time. A lot of things are crushing, you feel like you're being crushed by all these things. That's why you might use pressure instead. I'm under a great deal of pressure. Now, if I say pressure, then I'm talking about what's outside of me, the responsibilities, the things that are being asked of me, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that I feel that way. I may be great at handling pressure. I'm under a great deal of pressure, but I feel great. So if we say pressure, I think we're emphasizing the condition, the situation. And if we say I'm under a great deal of stress, that usually insinuates or suggests or implies that, yes, that pressure is there outside of me, but I also feel it, and it's not enjoyable, right? So I'm under a great deal of stress right now. That's why my hair is falling out. So I'm feeling it emotionally as well. So that's the difference in focus between stress and pressure, okay? So that's it. Those are the ones I wanted to share. And they can be used in a lot of different ways. The best thing to do is to practice them. We talked about sink in, hit home, on edge, overwhelmed, stretched thin, a breaking point, and under a great deal of stress or pressure. Under a lot of stress or pressure. If you have any questions about these, let me know, right? If you want to, and this is my recommendation, make your own examples. Try to make 1 or 2 examples for each one. This is the best way for you to actually get a sense for how to use them in your life. It's one thing to take information in through your ear holes. It's another to actually do something, because when you do something, you're sort of thinking through it, and it's forcing it to stick in your brain, right? That's what we want. I want you to come away from this with an ability to use these because they're so common. We need to talk about stress. We need to talk about things that happen in our lives, right? That cause us anxiety, that make us worry, that overwhelm us, okay? So practice, share your examples. I'd love to check those out. If you haven't already done so, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. That really helps out. And also, you can grab a free English course, Natural English Conversations, in the links in the description. All right. Howdy doody. How are we doing now? How are we doing? I think those are all really common and really useful. Any questions about those now? Alejandro, are you still giving feedback on Discord? I believe so, Alejandro. If I see any questions on Discord, I try to answer them. So if I missed any, then let me know. Emin says, I love your lessons. Thank you, Emin. I appreciate that. Shukri, hello, good evening. He is sinking in the ocean. That's not quite how it means, what it means. The way that you flip your hair gets me overwhelmed. Hope you're not talking about me. Who is interested in practicing speaking? That would be a good thing to do in the Discord. And Adela, hello. Hola, welcome, welcome, hello, and welcome. These are people who are here live. It's great to have you. Great to have you, great to have you, great to have you. And you know, I've got a video coming out about how to do this process of learning idioms and words, vocabulary in ChatGPT. I think it's a really good tool because it's essentially like having someone there who can give you feedback. Hey, here's an example I made. Is it correct? What do you think about this? Am I using this right? Could you explain the second example more? I have specific prompts, so look out for that video. I'll be posting it either later today or tomorrow. And I think it's going to be a good one. I've been doing the GBT videos recently because I think it is a really great tool for what it is, right? It's not going to replace everything in your life, but it is a good tool for doing specific things, right? Like writing emails, like getting feedback, like practicing new idioms, new words, a lot of things. Okay. All right. Well, we've also got a video that I want to go through. Did I miss anything? Let me just review my notes for a second. Alejandro says, I put my example about your last challenge on Discord the other day and ended up deleting it because it was there for about 2 days and nobody said a word about it. Well, yeah, I missed it, Alejandro. Pop it in there again and tag me. I'm sorry about that. I try to check it, but I must have missed that one. I've also been very busy the last 2 days, and I'll be honest, I haven't been super active on the Discord for the last 2 days because things have been very, very hectic. So, just be patient, Alejandro. If you post it again and tag me, I will get to it. I won't guarantee a specific time that I will get to it, but I will get to it. I always will get to it. What I can't do is say exactly when. So repost it, Alejandro. Be patient. Be patient. Be patient. Okay. So we've got a video that I want to use to pick out some words and phrases. We are going to be going through a video that was released before COVID. So it's interesting to see, I think, how people were thinking about this before, right? Sorry for mentioning it, Luke. I got frustrated a little bit and posted again. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. The Discord is a place that's a no-pressure environment, and that includes me. In other words, if I have to become a guy where I'm on call to correct things 24/7 and I have to respond in a specific time, and there's a lot of pressure, then I'm not going to have fun there. I'm in the Discord to relax and have fun, and I will check everything. Again, I will check everything. But if there are requirements around it being done by X, like 7 o'clock, no. If you want stuff to be checked that quickly, you got to probably pay somebody to do it. Because people have lives. They've got stuff to do. You know, people miss things. They skip things. They forget things. We're all humans here. Patience. Patience is a virtue. And yeah, I have no recollection. If I did see it, I have no recollection of it. So post it again. All right. So let's check out the video. And we're going to be doing a word bank. So we'll be, as we go through, we'll be sort of picking out some language, some vocabulary, and yeah, should be interesting, I hope. Let's see. All right. Hopping over here. Not there. Here. So what we're going to do is learn some useful language from a video called How to Prepare for the Next Global Recession. This video is from The Economist. We're going to be going through it and just pulling out the language and also noting, just out of curiosity, what is their perspective on the possibility of a global recession before the real recession? Right? They were not aware, I believe, even of COVID when they made this video. This was pre-COVID and obviously, because it's pre-COVID, pre-global recession. So I'm very curious for their take. Okay? All right. So let's get into it. And of course, we're going to be doing our old word bank. And our word bank is where we're going to be writing stuff down. Okay? We're not going to learn everything. When you watch a video, you want to pick out some stuff that's useful, some stuff that's interesting. You don't want to say, I will write down every single thing I don't know, because then then you are not focusing on, enjoying the video, right? So you want to do that too. All right, here we go.
We focused on this now because it's been a decade since the global recession of 2008 and 2009, and some interesting and worrying vulnerabilities are also popping up at the moment. In 2008 and 2009, the dominoes were really set up for quite a nasty financial and economic crisis. This time, the economic moment.
The dominoes were set up.
2008 and 2009, the dominoes were really set up for.
The dominoes were really set up for quite a nasty financial and economic crisis this time. Okay? So this is an interesting expression. We use dominoes when we talk about potential consequences, potential outcomes, potential events. Whether we're talking about them retroactively to try to explain why this happened, or whether we're talking about something that could happen in the future, right? So we say something like, the dominoes were set. The dominoes were set, WBRA, set up for. Now, sometimes we just say the domino effect. The domino effect is one thing leads to another thing leads to another. And that is a little different because then we're talking about the links between the events, right? And the dominoes are set up as sort of like there's a vulnerability. In fact, he uses the word vulnerable earlier to say there's a weakness there. And that weakness, because there's that weakness, there is a chance for things to go wrong. If there's a vulnerability, that doesn't mean that the issue is there. It means that the potential issue is there. If certain things happen, then because of the vulnerability, bad things will happen, okay? Vulnerability. And the adjective form, by the way, is vulnerable. Vulnerability is the noun form. Okay. Back to it.
Quite a nasty.
Look at that video quality. You can tell that that's 2008, 2009. It's amazing. I'm always amazed by, at the time, whenever I'm watching something, I think, this looks natural. This video quality looks like real life. And then when I see video played back from 10 years ago, it looks really old. And I think, well, that's what the world looked like back then? And so then I think, well, now when I look at things on TV, I think that's how it really looks. That's how life looks. When I look at myself and I look at the TV, I think, yeah, that's about the same. That's about right. But then in 10 years from now, I'll look back at that and I'll say, whoa, that looks so old. What the heck? Like, this looks like the 70s or something. It looks ancient.
Nasty financial and economic crisis. This time, the economic vulnerabilities aren't quite as large. They're large enough that we could see a slowdown in GDP.
Why is everybody, what are they doing on the phone? It looks like some finance bros talking on the phone, making some deals.
Growth, the slowdown in trade, and things of that nature. The real risk is that our lack of preparedness and the lack of room for global cooperation will turn what starts as kind of a minor downturn into something much larger and much more difficult to deal with sometime in the next year or two.
Well, that's a pretty good prediction, I would say. He uses the term downturn. He's used it a couple times now, so I think it's worth noting it. So a downturn, specifically in terms of the economy, is usually almost always used to talk about the economy. It's not usually used to talk about, for example, specific companies' revenue. You wouldn't say, for example, there was a downturn in my income this year. You would say there's a downturn in the economy. So it's usually a fairly broad term to talk about trends, right? You could talk about downturns possibly in climate. You could talk about downturns in a lot of different things, but usually we're talking about fairly broad trends rather than talking about a specific case, your individual situation. You probably would not use the word downturn. Here we're talking about trends, big trends. And I would say most often it's used for economic stuff.
The last big global downturn began in the United States with the collapse of the housing bubble and the financial sector there. Next time, if you didn't hear that, collapse of the housing bubble. So we use bubbles when we're talking about things that get, basically the value of the thing is not actually what it looks like it is. So maybe housing bubbles means the price of homes is very high, but the true value is lower, and something has artificially driven the price of houses higher, but it's a bubble because when it pops, things will crash down suddenly. There was a bubble in crypto. Things get inflated, and that means that the true value is not where it actually is. Or right now, it's at a place where it's not representing the true value of where it should be, and that's what we call a bubble, because there's potential for it to be popped. The trouble is much more likely to start elsewhere, and perhaps in the emerging world. Emerging economies are a much larger share of global.
How about a global pandemic called COVID?
Output than they used to be. They've also gone on something of a borrowing binge over the last 10 years.
Something of a borrowing binge. I think that's worth learning. Emerging markets have gone on something of a borrowing binge. Very useful word, binge. To binge means to consume a lot at one time, usually in an uncontrolled fashion, right? So we use binge when we talk about a TV show that we can't stop watching. They release a new series and we just stay up all night and watch the whole thing. Well, what are you doing? You are binge watching. You are binging on that show. It's unhealthy. It's too much. It's not balanced, right? And the same thing would be, for example, if you binge on food. If you binge eat, usually that's not good for you because you're consuming way too much food in a short span of time, and that's bad for you in a lot of different ways. Obviously, weight gain and all kinds of other problems. So binge is never used in a positive sense as far as I can judge. At least off the top of my head, binge is not something people use in a positive sense. I guess for binging a TV show, it's not that bad, right? If we really enjoy it, so we binge watch it. That's probably the most, let's say, harmless way that it's used. But a borrowing binge means that they're borrowing perhaps too much, they're borrowing a lot, and because of that, there's now some vulnerability, right? It's a borrowing binge. They've probably gone overboard with their borrowing, and that's probably going to be a problem. Okay, so let's keep going. Oh, and something of a borrowing binge. That's just a way to phrase it, right? I'm something of an expert. They've gone on something of a borrowing binge, right? There's not a lot of meaning in that phrasing. Something of a is sort of like it's approximate to that. It's just a way to introduce that concept. Something of a something. I'm something of a something. I'm something of a something. Ah. Okay.
Which means that they could be due for a reckoning. There are also reasons to be concerned about.
That's why I'm not writing down everything. It's very tempting to say due for a reckoning. Oh, that's a good one. A reckoning, that's a really good word. I'm not going to write it down because I don't want to get bogged down in defining everything, right? But look that one up yourself. Due for a reckoning. A reckoning, that's a great word. I like it.
The euro area, and in particular Italy, which has an enormous public debt problem and where markets have been feeling a bit jittery about.
Those guys don't look human, okay? I don't know who those guys are, but look at how they walk. They're very stiff. I think maybe there are reptiles living inside of their bodies, controlling them with joysticks, and that's why they walk like that. I don't know who those people are, but I think they're being controlled by reptiles with joysticks.
Debt problem, and where markets have been feeling
Look how he walks. Something off about that. Reptiles, joysticks.
a bit jittery about their ability to pay that back, and that could relaunch the euro area debt crisis that we saw about a half decade ago.
Euro area, just to be clear, when he's saying euro area, European Union, where the euro is used, area. Okay, just in case you didn't catch that. A decade and a half ago, 15 years ago.
The tools governments normally use to fight a recession won't be available in the same way that they normally are the next time around. Interest rates will be very low, and so we normally rely on central banks to do interest rate cutting to perk up.
Okay, so they are raising an interesting point here that's relevant. Interest rates being low, they did seem to predict that would be an issue, and that was a major issue in the financial or economic issues that we're experiencing now. Interest rates are at the top of everyone's mind. They had to, in order to fix the inflation problems, they had to raise interest rates in a big way, and they're still doing so at the time of me saying this. Yeah, sorry guys, I don't watch a lot of news, so if I don't know politicians, I just don't care. I don't care.
Spending, perk up growth, and they're not going to be able to do that. So pretty quickly, they're going to have to turn to less tested methods. Money printing to buy bonds, quantitative easing was something that was used last time. That's going to be used again, but that works in a much more uncertain way and is much more politically contentious than some of the tools that are ordinarily used. Within countries,
nice music. Dun, 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 dun. I've noticed that marimba is the go-to instrument for all informational videos. Did you notice that? Marimba is that dun, 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 that sound. If you watch a lot of videos, and I think it's getting less common because there was marimba saturation in the market of content for any content related pieces. And I have a couple videos in the past where I use marimba as well, where you're trying to explain something, a principle, a concept, introduce an idea, then you use marimba. And then there was marimba overkill, marimba saturation, and now we're seeing a crash in the marimba consumption market. There's no audience for marimba these days. So this video is very passé, it seems.
The problem is that government is much more polarized. Across the world, you have many more populist parties, nationalist parties.
Polarized is one I do want to focus on, right? So if you have polarization, the adjective form of that is polarized. And we can use the ing form as well. So let's say you have a polarizing issue. A polarizing issue is one where people tend to have very strong opinions on one side or the other. It's not an issue that people just don't really worry about, right? Not a lot of people care about or think about. And it seems like the world has become more polarized, with a D there, meaning that people have stronger issues on two political sides, let's say left and right, maybe conservative, liberal, right? There are different sort of, you could use different ends of the poles, you could describe those in different ways, but people tend to have stronger opinions about issues and they see the other side as the enemy. And when you hear people talk about political polarization, which is another form, by the way, the noun form polarization, or things being very polarized, or the issue being polarizing, a polarizing issue, we're talking about strong opinions and things that cause people to fight from opposite sides, maybe villainize each other, fighting from opposite sides on that particular issue, right? Well, what's an issue that's not polarizing? That might be a tough one. How about an issue that's not polarizing? Is fruit juice a polarizing issue? I don't think so. I think that might be the last thing we have that's not polarizing. Everyone, I think, can get into fruit juice on one level or another. If you don't like orange juice, maybe you like apple juice. Maybe you don't like juice, but you're still okay with people drinking it, right? I feel like fruit juice is our final non-polarizing issue. Everything else is highly polarized. Even heating is becoming a polarizing issue. The way we heat our homes right now, there's a big debate going on about stoves and the environment, and it's very polarized. Fruit juice, I don't think so. I don't have any strong opinions about fruit juice, except that I really like pomegranate juice. Recently, I've been getting into 100% pomegranate juice. It's pretty sour, but I really like it. It's very satisfying, and it really quenches your thirst. Actually, maybe I have a very strong opinion about that, because if someone doesn't like pomegranate juice as much as me, they're my enemy. That's how I feel about it. Okay, anyway, back to the video.
And it's going to be very hard to reach the agreement that's necessary to launch big spending programs and things of that nature. Then you also have disagreements across countries.
I'm not going to write that down, but things of that nature is a way to say things like that. It's exactly the same. Things like that, things of that nature. What's the difference? The difference is in connotation, and the connotation would be things of that nature sounds more formal than things like that, okay? Things of that nature, yes.
Which means that it's much more likely you have contentious policies, tariffs that go up, currency wars, things of that nature as countries struggle to deal with the next downturn.
Got a lot of the same words coming up. Downturn, depolarize. We got a lot of the same terms returning, which is good.
Ideally, governments would be taking some steps right now to get ready for the next recession. They should be changing their central bank policy targets. What we've learned is that a low inflation target doesn't give central banks enough room to fight recessions before interest rates fall to zero. They should also be getting their budgets ready, which means preparing to include measures that will increase spending automatically when the economy weakens in the future, so that they don't have to have fights in Parliament about whether or not to expand spending when the time comes. But then, most important of all, I think, governments need to coordinate their responses with each other. That makes it much more likely that we don't enter a scenario like we did in the 1930s, when tariff barriers went up, when there were currency wars and
Enter a scenario. Listen.
changing their central bank policy targets. What we've learned is that a low inflation target doesn't give central banks enough room to fight recessions before interest rates fall to zero. They should also be getting their budgets ready, which means preparing to include measures that will increase spending automatically when the economy weakens.
Is that the budget? Is that the budget? Is it in the budget? Is in that red box? Is that how they do it? That lizard man there holding the budget in a red box? Is that Downing Street in London? And this man is a reptile man being controlled by lizards with the budget in a red box. Is that what I'm seeing here?
In the future, so that they don't have to have fights in Parliament about whether or not to expand spending when the time comes. But then, most important of all, I think, governments need to coordinate their responses with each other. That makes it much more likely that we don't enter a scenario like we did in the 1930s.
Okay, enter a scenario. Now, scenario, you're probably familiar with this word, I would guess. Enter a scenario. So a scenario is similar to a situation, and a specific situation that is usually something you can imagine beforehand, right? I don't want to enter a scenario where, and then you would add where to it at the end, and then describe that future possible thing so that we can then make plans to avoid it, right? You often hear people say worst case scenario. What is the worst case scenario? The worst, I'll put that up here. The worst case scenario. The worst case scenario is that, and then you would describe the bad thing that could happen. That's the worst case scenario. It's a way to talk hypothetically about the future. The word scenario itself isn't negative or positive. You're just sort of painting a picture of a potential, right? And usually a scenario doesn't exist now. So if we're in it right now, so we wouldn't be talking about it as a scenario because it's what's happening right now. We would say, how do we fix this? What should we do now, right? But if we say, what about the best possible scenario? Where again, we're imagining probably in the future, because if we're imagining, it's not the past, probably. So we're probably imagining something, a way of doing things that will result in a specific set of circumstances, a specific situation that either we want or we want to avoid. That's usually how it is used. That's typically how we use a scenario. Here he's just saying a scenario, where or when, and then he's going to describe it. Worst case scenario is focusing on the negative, and you could also have what is the best case scenario. Same thing. Same thing. Oops, I got to go over to the video. Oopsies.
Currency wars and competitive devaluations, and when ultimately that led to some pretty significant and nasty geopolitical tension.
Significant and nasty geopolitical tension. Oh, I like that last phrase that you used. Let's spend a little time on that. Geopolitical tension. Geopolitical tension. Tension. And he also used contentious earlier. He used contentious. So tension just means there's two sides usually, and there's it's not smooth, it's not relaxed between them. There's some discomfort, there's some unease, there could be problems, right? Geopolitical is related to world politics. Geo means world, political politics. So geopolitical, adjective, tension is tension around the world politically. That's all it means. And if things are contentious, then there's some disagreements. So polarizing, contentious, and tension, all of these words are used to describe something very similar of this. These sides, and they're kind of not seeing things eye to eye, and they might have different interests, and those interests might cause them to have some conflict, right? Okay. So in this video, we didn't talk about every single thing, but we talked about dominoes being set up for something, or a domino effect. We talked about vulnerability or some weakness or something that could result in an issue. We talked about a downturn, usually for larger trends, when things go down or usually get worse. We talked about borrowing, binge borrowing, right? And binging on something, consuming a lot of it at an unhealthy level. So countries, developing countries, on a borrowing binge, right? You could use it as an adjective or a noun. Things being polarized or polarizing things, where we have these two sides and they are kind of in conflict. They have some tension, that feeling of between them, and then that would be contentious. So contentious is just another way to describe it, meaning that their interests are not aligned. They don't agree on everything, right? We talked about a scenario, a future scene, possible thing that could happen, best case, worst case scenario. So this is what you do if you want to learn from videos. You just pick out some stuff, you look it up, you make sure you pay attention to it in context, you practice it a bit. Check out my upcoming video about how to actually look stuff up in ChatGPT, how to use ChatGPT as sort of a companion tool for looking stuff up and practicing what you look up by making examples. So if you want, try to make examples with these words and phrases that we learned from this video. You can put those in the comments if you like. If you haven't already done so, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe, and also check out my full courses in the links in the description. All right. So that's that. That is that. And I think we're going to call it a day for today. So thank you all so much for joining. Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't call it a lecture, but I appreciate all of you being here. You know, if you want, you can join the Discord. That is a community that is free to join at the moment. It's just a great place to hang out. No pressure for anyone, Alejandro. That's a joke. That's a joke. That's a joke. So yeah, feel free to join. I think it's a good place to chat and share stuff. And if you want, you can get a free course in the links in the description. My course, Natural English Conversations. You can also subscribe on the website. I post stuff there and send out occasional blogs via email, as well as offers for new courses that come out. If you want, you can get 30% off on a monthly membership on the website, and that's 30% off not for 1 month, but for the first whole year, right? So I think that's a pretty good deal, and you get access to all the courses there, okay? Other than that, hit the like button, subscribe, follow wherever you're watching or listening. If you're listening, figure out where you can go watch if you want to do that. If you're watching and you want to listen, make sure you check that out. Everything's in the links in the description. I hope you all have a fantastic weekend. Look out for my upcoming video about how to learn words using ChatGPT. I think it's going to be an interesting one. Again, hope you have a safe, fun, interesting weekend, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.